Namaste everyone here at BookTube. Welcome to my channel Hamsavahini Vajra Astra. I'm Ahuna. In today's video, I'm going to talk about the July 2020 Jane Austen Challenge, which has been hosted by Katie from Books&Things and by Marissa from Blatantly Bookish. Now, we are at the end of this month and the end of our journey with the July Jane Austen Challenge. It has been a beautiful journey. I have loved participating in all the challenges, and although I have not finished entirely every challenge, but I would say I've loved the journey. I would also like to thank Marissa and Katie in a big way for putting this beautiful challenge together, and also the wonderful booktubers who have participated and created excellent content. A compilation of this content has been done by Claudia from Spinster's library, and I will leave a link to the video in which she has created this compilation, so that you can just click on the link and it lands you straight to that particular video. So in today's video, I'm going to talk about the first reading challenge, which I have not spoken of during this entire course of the July Jane Austen Challenge, and the second part of this video is going to be of a quick wrap-up. Now, these are the content, the literature which I've been reading for this particular challenge. So I'll be speaking, or I'll be wrapping up this entire July Jane Austen challenge with this particular literature. Now let's get back to the first reading challenge, which I've never mentioned. The first reading challenge was to read any of the novels which have been written by Jane Austen, or any one of the 6 major novels which has been written by Jane Austen. So for this challenge, I had chosen Mansfield Park. Now, ironically, I had read Mansfield Park 25 years ago at the age of 13, and at that point I had been mesmerized by the language of this particular book, and the pace of this book and the plot of this book had taken a backseat. However, 25 years later, as I am reading this entire plot once again, I believe that I find the plot a little too slow-paced, and also things don't really start stirring up until we have the entry of 2 characters, the Crawford brother and sister, who are the relatives of Dr. Grant. Now, I know I'm talking from, or I am revealing the entire story or summing up the entire story somewhere from the middle, but I believe the first portion of the entire story was quite slow paced, so I'll just jump into the place where it really started stirring up. In my opinion, there are a lot of controversies which we see in the behavior of the characters and the way that they have been brought up, whereas the Burton sisters have been brought up in a highly civilized and a competitive and an educated environment where they are supposed to know how to behave, yet on the contrary, when they glimpse Henry Crawford, they start flirting and they start competing for him, despite the fact that the elder sister, was Maria Burton, is actually engaged to Mr. Rushworth, but then she finds Mr. Henry Crawford too attractive, so she starts flirting with him, and there are consequences which follow. Now, this is against their upbringing. This is the first thing that I observed. Second, Fanny Price, who is our favorite heroine of this particular novel, is faced with a tempest of emotions because of the spark of so-called love which happens between Miss Crawford and Edmund, who is one of her favorite cousins from amongst the 4 Burton cousins. Now, she is not supposed to have any romantic inclinations, but ultimately we finally find that she realizes that she has deep affections subconsciously for Edmund, which is quite the contrary to how she was supposed to have been raised, although the Burtons and Mrs. Norris, who was always indulgent in letting Fanny know her place in the society, even though she was brought up amongst the Burtons, yet there must have been some, I would say, some deficit in making Fanny realize that she is not supposed to harbor such affections. However, at the end of it all goes well, and there was a situation which was created when Mr. Burton, who was supposed to be the stern man and the used to uphold the discipline of the society of Mansfield Park, I would say. So forgive me for my rambling. What I meant to say was, I'll just rephrase it again. Mr. Bertram was the man who was supposed to maintain the strict discipline of Mansfield Park. And as they say, when the cat's away, the mice will play. So that was the situation which was created when the Crawfords had come to visit Mansfield Park, and they were trying to display their affections towards each other through a play, and the entire irony of the play and the irony of the situation was actually almost catastrophic on the nerves of our dear Fanny Price. So she also had to face her own background from which she came from, and that in itself was something very hard for her. However, we find that yes, at the end of it all, everything went well. And although I would say I have not yet explored the entire character analysis and the ebbing and the tidings of the plot, I would I plan to read an annotated version further in the future of Mansfield Park to better understand Mansfield Park, because I was not very happy with the fact that the pace was slow. So I believe there are some ebbs and tides within the plot which I might have missed out. So an annotated version of the same Mansfield Park would actually help me, which I will do in the future. So this is my summary of reading Mansfield Park for the second time, of course. And now this will bring us to the next section, before which I would like to add that if there is anybody who is interested in knowing a detailed plot of Mansfield Park, please refer to Claudia's video. Claudia from Spinster's library had summarized every chapter of Mansfield Park as she was reading it and compiled it in a video. I would post a link to that video in the description box so that you can check on that, and I will be back with the wrap-up soon. So this brings us to the second part of this video, which is the July Jane Austen wrap-up, which I would be doing sequentially. Now, there were 7 challenges. Any one could have been attempted, but I tried all the 7 challenges because this is the first time that I was trying a challenge on BookTube, and also because I have always loved Jane Austen and I wanted to know Jane Austen all over again, which I did successfully. So the first challenge was to read any one of the 6 major novels of Jane Austen. So for this particular challenge, I had chosen Mansfield Park, which I read for a second time during this challenge after 25 years. The first time I had read it 25 years ago, I was just 13, and now after 25 years, I had a very different opinion. I did find the plot very slow-paced. However, I will be reading an annotated version of Mansfield Park to delve deeper into the characters and the plots so that I don't find it slow-paced. There must be a reason why it's slow-paced, which I probably have overseen. Now, the second challenge was to read something or literature which is written by Jane Austen, which is not one of her 6 main novels. So the work which I'd chosen was The Prayers of Jane Austen. Now, what I learned from the Prayers of Jane Austen was that Jane Austen was very dedicated, she was very simple, as well as she was very earnest with her spiritual life, and she believed that she had to work out. Christianity was more of a place where you had to, or it was a faith, sorry, I would rephrase that once again. Jane Austen believed that the Christian life was supposed to be worked out in daily living, and she has tried to summarize and show an example of all this in the novels which she has written. And most of the characters in her novels have a moralistic viewpoint. If you really look into the characters which are present in all her writings and in all her novels, we will find that there is a moral viewpoint, and this will turn the entire way that we view the novel or the character. And we have to also remember that she was the daughter of a rector of Steventon, and her relatives were all clergymen, so she had grown in an environment of faith, and spirituality was just the first nature of Jane Austen, I would say. So she used to view everything very pragmatically. she was brought up in an environment of boys, but she was extremely pragmatic of the way that you had to uphold your spiritual life and what works in the society, what does not work in the society. And she had a very hilarious way of portraying how you are expected to stay. If you are in the post of the clergyman, you are expected to fulfill your duties and not take your post as a profession, but more of as a vocation which you need to fulfill as a duty to God. So this is something which I have learned just by reading Jane Austen prayers, but I've also looked into the internet archives of some of the other books which I wanted to read. Of course, I have not acquired them till now, but I hope to do so in the future. There is Paula Collinsworth or Hollinsworth, I would link the name below, which actually, the book by this particular author actually investigates into the spiritual life and the roots of a Christian spiritual faith, which I'm very interested in, and I would do so. So this is what I learned from this particular challenge. Now, challenge number 3. What I'm doing is I have written down the challenges over here so that I don't forget. Now, challenge number 3 was to read a non-fiction work about Jane Austen or her time. So the book which I had chosen for this particular challenge was Jane Austen Alive by Claire Tomlin. Now, this book is a fantastic book. I thoroughly enjoyed it because I love details. Now, for those who love biographies but are more into the flow of life and not into the details of a person, would not like this book. This book is not for them. But for those who love details, and especially details about how Jane Austen's work came into being and what or who are the people who actually inspired her to write her novels and to portray the characters and the various colors and hues in her characters, I would say please read this book. There's a lot of details which are given, and if you read this very carefully, you will see why all the books come together and why all the characters have colors and hues as they do show up in her novels. So that's what I learned from this particular biography. Speaking of which, I would also like to mention that if you are interested in biographies of Jane Austen, and if you're new to Jane Austen, please check the channel of Rita J Dashwood. Now, Rita J Dashwood has completed her PhD in Jane Austen studies, and she has wonderful content on her channel. In fact, I am actually going to read one of her recommendations of the biographies, and I will post a link to her video which recommends the biographies which she has suggested for us to read. So if you really like biographies of Jane Austen, please check her video. Now, let's get on with challenge number 4. Challenge number 4 was to read a retelling of any Jane Austen's novel. So for this, I had chosen Austenistan, which is Jane Austen in Pakistan. It was a charming little read, and it did give us a very close glimpse of the contemporary Pakistan and the position of women in aristocratic circles, which is not very different from the Regency era plight of women, and how they have to secure men and how they have to keep up the face of their womanhood despite calamity or despite good fortune, and how they have to move in the society. I loved most of the stories. Of course, there were variations, and what I mentioned as disappointments were actually variations. Most of these stories have been inspired from small excerpts from various novels of Jane Austen, especially Pride and Prejudice. So I would recommend anybody who wants to know more about contemporary life in Pakistan or Jane Austen's inspired life in Pakistan, please read Austenistan. There is also another book which has been released by, I believe, they call it JAS, which is Jane Austen Society of Pakistan, and Lalin Sukhera is heading this particular society. It's called Unmarriagable, and it has been written by Sonia Kamal. Of course, it's not part of my TBR, but or it's not part of the literature which I have read in this particular challenge. I believe Reesha from Love of Classics was reading that book, so maybe she has given a review about it. So I would try and link her video as well in the description box so that you can at least check what exactly she has to say about it. Also, let's get back to our challenges. Now, we completed challenge number 4. Challenge number 5 was to read a book by a contemporary of Jane Austen, and for this I did pick up Ivanhoe by Sir Walter Scott. Now, this is a beautifully descriptive novel. I loved the language, and it's set in a time when there was a huge power struggle between the Normans and the Saxons, and the Normans were dominating the Saxons, but there is also a collaboration, there is romance, there's a chivalrous nature of Saxon, there's this there is a virtuous nature of Normans, and there's a lot of cross-culture which goes on, but you could see the cultural diversity and what made the stories really descriptive and beautiful and vivid in this particular era. So it's an era of conquest, and it's an era of chivalry. It's also an era of strong moral foundations in men, and also of romance. So I did love this novel. However, I've not completed it, and I hope to complete it in the future, but I am inspired to read more of Sir Walter Scott's works, and thanks to this Jane Austen challenge, because this has brought me to really look into Sir Walter Scott's novels further. Now, challenge number 6 was to watch any direct screen adaptation of Jane Austen. So for this, I watched Sense and Sensibility, which had won the 1995 Academy Awards. I loved this, and the best performance that I loved was of Alan Rickman, who played Colonel Brandon, who is, I believe, the best of the characters in this particular series, or in this particular novel. And that brings us to the 7th challenge, which was to watch any modern retelling of any of Jane Austen's novels. So I watched Lost in Austen, which was a modern retelling of Pride and Prejudice, which involved a time travel element, and it was hilarious. I really and thoroughly enjoyed it. And there were 2 readathons, or read-alongs, not readathons, read-alongs. The first read-along was of Emma, which I could not participate in, but the second read-along was of Pride and Prejudice, which I did manage to complete with this particular edition. It's a campfire edition, and it's a graphic novel, because I love graphic novels and illustrations. I would say the dialogues are not compromised, of course. However, as what you could see is it's not very slim, you know, as graphic novels go. It's not very slim. There is no compromise on any part of the story, and most of the illustrations are all inspired by the 1995 Pride and Prejudice, and I loved most of the dialogues which were there. I could not find any dialogues being compromised or missed out. So anybody who wants to collect the graphic novel edition, I would suggest, because there are manga editions as well, but I would suggest please take the or please try and get your hands on the Campfire edition, because it's wonderful. And with this, this brings us to the end of this July Jane Austen challenge. I have loved participating. I loved the people who have created the content, and I have learned so much into the entire characters of most of the novels, and looking at the entire novel series in a completely different view. So I believe this journey has taught me a lot, and I would love to participate in the next challenge. I believe there is a Victober challenge which will be starting off in October, but as far as Jane Austen is concerned, I would love to participate in the next Jane Austen challenge next year. So with this, I would wrap up this video, and I would say a big thank you once again to all the participants of BookTube who have participated in this challenge, and also to Katie and Marissa who have put this challenge together. So I will be back with another challenge, of course not a Jane Austen challenge, but I'll be back with another challenge video. And happy reading till then, and take good care of yourself. Namaste and goodbye.